Don't get status reports from your team. Get soul reports. That's the takeaway from this week's DesuckifyWork podcast with Carin Knoop. Carin is a wonderful writer and the executive director of the Case Research and Writing Group at Harvard Business School. We talked about the importance of mental health at work and how managers and leaders need a whole new set of skills to deal with the issues so many workers are facing. Carin offers a bunch of great ideas for how to engage with employees who are struggling, most of which boil down to the simple but hard act of listening. Check in with your teams beyond the to-do list to see how they're really doing and support them accordingly. You don't have to be a therapist, but you do need to be a human being. Remember humans? Welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast, the show where we cut through the BS and find ways to make work more fun, more human, and less ridiculous. All of which makes your business more profitable, by the way. If you enjoy this one, please like, share, rate, review, or subscribe to the podcast. Let the desuckifying begin. Here's Carin. Okay, Carin Knoop, welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast.
Thank you. Awesome to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. I know you're doing lots of good things in the world, and I want to give you a chance to talk a bit about it, whether it's your work, your writing, whatever you want to talk about in terms of your story.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was thinking that coming on that maybe we don't want to be too good on your podcast because then a lot of people would be out of jobs. So we have to keep work a little bit not good. Hopefully have different ways to looking at things that will be helpful to discuss.
Yeah. So what are you doing out there right now? I know you work at Harvard Business School, and then you also do some writing on Medium. What's the core of what you're trying to put into the world?
So the puzzle to me has been, about 15 years ago, I'm a case writer, so I support faculty who write cases for Harvard Business School. And in a lot of these instances, companies are really trying to, make money a particular way, but they seem to have been an understanding about the impact of mental health at work. And that, you see managers spending a lot of time trying to save $2 on toilet paper. And yet, there's still so much stigma around mental health at work. So we can discuss, this has changed slightly. And so this prompted really individual work on trying to sort of tease that out, come up with things that managers could be doing. And then in 2018, I supported a faculty member, John Quelch, who was willing to partner on a book on compassion management of mental health in the modern workplace. And the thought there was that at the time, you had a lot of literature that was for, like at the EAP and corporate levels. And then you had a lot of self-help books. But really, there was nothing in the middle. And what you have in the middle, basically, managers, educators, parents, all these shock absorbers of society who are really trying to just get work done and also motivate, a population that seems to be increasingly challenged.
Yeah.
And so we really wrote the book for that middle management level. And then from there, I've written, several articles and had the pleasure of having conversations like this one with people around the world. And in some ways, I think we've made progress, but I think in some ways, this conversation around mental health at work have also increased our expectations of what work can be. And I think that's actually gotten us in trouble.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I want to explore that a little bit for sure, because I think I know where you're going with some of that. Before we get into that, I'm curious, just at a high level, what are you noticing from, whether it's through the work you do, your writing, your conversations, what's the sort of temperature of people's mental state right now at work in particular?
So it's difficult to answer these conversations. On the one hand, the stats tell us that everybody's really despondent, and part of me intuits it to be true, but the other part of me is concerned about two things. First, there's real hyperbole in language everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So if I write an article saying workers are fine, nobody's going to click on it. If I say 75% of people are burnt out, people are going to click on it.
Yeah.
So there's a hyperbole of language in how we talk about this, even on podcasts like this one, and how we write about them, because if we don't, people aren't going to read it. And the press is also falling victim to that. The other is, we have very little baseline in a way. So now we're all concerned about people being unhappy at work, but nobody asked our parents if they were happy at work or how they were doing. Same thing with youth, struggling. I do think there's an over stress on young people these days, but nobody asked me how I was doing as a kid. So we're going into these conversations with hyperbole, little baseline, and the world is just difficult, and when you look at the definition of mental health is the ability to deal with normal stressors of life in order to work effectively and productively and contribute to your community.
Yeah.
COVID is not a normal stressor. Social media is not a normal stressor. Political radicalization, we can decide whether they're stressors or outcome of stressors. I actually think that it's a reflection of stressor. But so the world has just become more difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
Regardless of outcomes. One puzzle, I think, to me is that we have been at this conversation for so long, like over 100 years of trying to improve worker well-being. And yet here we are still, pretty much 30% people are not engaged, according to Gallup. So I'd say the short answer to your question is that people seem to be unhappy and annoyed, but I think that people look unhappy and annoyed at the bus stop.
Yeah, it really is an interesting challenge, sort of teasing out the truth from this, because even as we've probably observed this for 100 years, to your point, the language around it has evolved and changed. I think the conversations have become a little more intense and frequent, with social media and all that stuff. I mean, you go on TikTok and there's a whole like mental health TikTok like conversation happening, and there's a lot of self-diagnosis happening, and there's a lot of, I think, use and potentially misuse of some of the language around mental health, words like trauma and things like that, where there is genuine, real trauma. And then there's just like, I had a bad day. And where does it veer into trauma? And then I like what you're noting about the stressors, because this idea of what a normal day is, I think that's part of it, is what should normal even be right now, because nobody feels normal. And we can't necessarily change a lot of these external factors. Like, I can't do much about political turmoil. I can do my part, but I'm not really a lever against that. I can't do much about AI. It's here. It's doing what it does. I can choose how I interact with it and how I emotionally manage it, but I can't change that. I can't change a culture that seems very driven to cost-saving measures and layoffs and things like that, where that becomes the way businesses work now, is driving efficiency out of the business, which is layoffs. So how does my brain even handle the idea of what normal should be, so that then I can know, am I in fact dealing with normal well?
This brings up two things for me. So back on the hyperbole and what is normal. So if somebody asks you, how are you doing? And you say, oh, I'm great.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of people saying, what is wrong with you? The world is on fire. People are getting shot. And I'm like, I'm okay. I'm happy. So it's no longer okay to be okay. It used to say it is okay not to be okay. And now it's no longer okay to be okay, because somehow you're presented then as a heartless person or thoughtless person, or your list of items that we cannot control brings up for me the items that we can control. And one of them is the extent to which we bring our personal lives and the outside world to work. So there's a lot of complaint about work following us at home. That has been the standard complaint. I have to do emails at night and I have to work on the weekend. What I encourage a lot of people who do feel overwhelmed at work is to not engage with their outside world and their personal lives at all. So think back when we started at work, or when I was a young mother. I left the house, my child went to school. Maybe she was home when I came home. Maybe she wasn't. Sooner or later, she would materialize. Now I observe the parents in the workforce, they're on their phone, tracking the kid, going to school, on the nanny cam. If there's no lunch that they like, then they order Uber Eats to their children. Then they refresh their news feed. Every time something dramatic happens at work, you hear it. So one of my contentions about stress in the workplace is that it isn't the stress of work. It is the stress that we're letting in from the outside coming into work. What do people do when they idle now, TJ? It used to be we would go out and smoke with each other, or maybe we would go have a coffee. Now we're on our phones, making sure that we're up to date on the worst things, maybe checking a dating website, and, Billy Bob didn't write us back, and so now we're sad. So I think imposing clearer boundaries, being where we are, especially in the workplace, I think would really do us wonder. And maybe this is an experiment that people can run, which is just do not engage with anybody outside of work for a day at work. I challenge actually our listeners to try to do that.
Yeah.
And you will be amazed, because then you'll have to go to lunch with somebody.
Well, yeah. I mean, what I'm picturing is a bunch of people freaking out right now, because it's like, wait a second. You're telling me I can't do any of those things that you just described. I mean, my kid just has to deal with whatever they have to deal with at school all day. My dating life has to just be put aside. I can't find out about the news.
Yes.
The world is burning, and you're telling me to just ignore it for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. Well, that seems crazy. I happen to agree with you that I think it's important to find ways to actually be where we are, which is what you were kind of saying there. Like, and this is, I think, is just true in our lives in general. We are so pulled to be connected to everything all the time, as opposed to recognizing, how can I best be where I am right now? And I think that definitely feels like part of it to me, in terms of why we're stressed. We're just overloading our circuitry constantly. How do you do that, right? Because I think people are going to be like, that sounds impossible to just completely separate that way. What might help make it feel more possible?
So maybe it's actually taking a step back, which is when there's discomfort or emotion, it's data, which is what are actually the emotions that you're feeling. So it may be that you cannot control your kid. So why am I feeling this overarching need to control and be able to track it all day? Is it that I need dopamine? Then is there a different way? Why is it that I need dopamine? Is it that I need to be, all wound up with my political tribe because I want to be, seen safe and secure, and I want to make sure that I'm served the news that will prove me that I'm right and that you're an idiot and that I'm smart? So that's a failure in self-esteem.
Yeah.
So what I think are interesting with these exercises of retraction, I mean, literally, it's the addiction response is, it is not about the addiction. We are addicted to phone, control, communication, acceleration, impatience. This is happening for a reason. The reason I do not believe is social media. I think this makes it worse, but I think we turn to it because of something else, and another problem we are trying to solve. It could be boredom. And so if you extend what is happening to your child, a child that is constantly being used to having a parent solve a problem will not develop resilience skills, patience skills, creativity skills. If our parents are negotiating school lunches for us, then you and I might not barter and say, I'll eat your carrots today, you'll eat my carrots tomorrow. Are you going to eat your Cheetos? And then we'll be on our merry way. So we're depriving our children also of practicing these skills of autonomy and restraints. One thing with the self-care movement is that we're adding more things, right? So now people are stressed when they don't go to yoga. Or, I cannot date because every night I have to do self-care.
Right.
So I think that's been a tendency. 10 years ago, I predicted that religion would make a comeback. And, I see it at my church, the pews are full.
Yeah.
And I think people are now finally realizing that, believing in something greater, whatever form that may take for you, being in community, volunteering, maybe putting other care instead of self-care. Might be one way to think about it. I think we have just become way too self-centered.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think
And the world will turn without you checking the news, TJ, I'm sorry to say.
Well, it's remarkable how our brains seem to convince us otherwise, right? And I think
Right.
like it feels imperative when you do any of these behaviors that you're talking about. And I hear you saying, well, there's clearly something underneath that.
Yes.
We're hurting in some way. We're nursing a wound in a very easily accessible way. And what I hear you saying is there are other, perhaps more effective ways of doing that, including finding community, volunteering, being other focused, which I hear this from a lot of people these days. It's like we are so turned inward, I think with good intention, like I want to feel better.
Yes, of course.
You know? And it feels like going inward is the way to solve that. Let me just keep digging around and finding it. And then these tools, whether it is social media or distraction of any kind, feel like a good way to just, like it's a balm for our pain. You know, one of the things I think we're often avoiding is just the simple silence of being alone with the actual thoughts and feelings that are inside of us that we don't know how to deal with. And we're just covering them with busyness. And I think that eventually bleeds into the way we behave at work too, meaning we feel like we need to be on top of the people we're working with. We need the Slack thing where it's pinging 78 times per minute. We need constant awareness, constant connection, but none of it is actually useful awareness or real connection. I get curious about that. How would we bring more awareness to the right things at work and more real human connection, not just this sense that I'm lightly tethered to everybody and everything all the time?
And I think this has made it very difficult for managers also because, you know, in addition to all the difficulties and managing AI and managing layoffs and managing economic uncertainty and tariffs and everything else, you know, now basically companies for, you know, in the pandemic and even before with the DI movement was, you know, you are responsible for the well-being of people. You know, you're responsible for seeing them, for accommodating them, for making sure that they're happy. And that's really an impossible task for most managers. And then you wind up overloading them. You know, I think that so discipline always starts with ourselves. And I think one discipline that maybe we can also talk about is the discipline to realize that work cannot give us everything. And to me, the dating life and the work life have actually followed each other a little bit more. And they've both been transformed by technology in a way.
Yeah.
And so now we have romanticized work as a place that, you know, can be giving my identity, my substance, my love, my belonging, my purpose.
Yeah.
So things we used to find somewhere else. And so I think if you're bringing these things into the workplace, and if you really do need your work to give you meaning, then you will want to be connected to everything at once, because you will take being excluded from a meeting as not being part of the tribe or not in the know or not worthy enough. So I think this has complicated our relationship to work. And then, you know, when even on the recruiting side, you know, people are using Gen AI to find each other, much like on dating sites. So both parties are lying. They're all filtering. They get matched by algorithms. Everybody's lying. This company is great and I care about you. And then you're like, oh, great, I'll join this company because it cares about me. Companies are non-sentient beings. They cannot care about you. You know, you can have a manager who will give you the tools to do your work. That's what the company should be doing. And paying you enough. So I think some also return to a more realistic view of what work can and should be, which is part of a complete life, not the center of life. And so the new generations, I think, are moving away from work being the center of life. And yet still have these very high expectations about what it should be, even for the time that is there. So their expectation is that I don't want to give everything at work, but I want the work to give me everything. And that is not a good quadrant of the matrix for either
Yeah.
party at the moment. So I think this is partly what is happening. And then, back to the pandemic, working from home. Now we are also comparing each other online. So what is it that I see about your work? How great your podcast is doing, I but otherwise, do I hear bad things? No, because
Right.
I'm going to post about my promotions. I'm going to be so humbled on LinkedIn. So even that has been romanticized. Everybody
Yeah.
else's partner looks better because everybody else's partner is filtered.
Yeah.
So I would advocate for a return to a more realistic expectation
Mm,
about what work can be.
yeah. I wonder what that looks like. I mean, I come from a place of I've experienced work when it felt very much like just a job and I hated it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
didn't like not feeling joy in the work. I really and so when I ended up going into the world of advertising for many years and that really sort of fueled me because it gave me a chance to enjoy my work. Like I would show up and I'd be excited about what I got to
Mm-hmm.
do that day. And it fueled parts of me, meaning the ability to solve problems and think creatively, which is just a big part of who I am. And I think what I hear you saying and where my brain goes is how can we have an expectation or create a work situation for ourselves that does feed us in some way, that
Mm-hmm.
does give us something? It's not just work, unless you want it to just be work, because that's a fair choice. But to your point, not have it effectively be like a substitute for church, community,
Family,
family, like
self-esteem.
all of the core tenets of our life. Like I think a more integrated life that includes all of those pieces. And then it's like, where does work fit? What do I want
Mm-hmm.
and or need from
Mm-hmm.
work? And that actually brings a question I would love to ask you. Like in your work, I mean, what role does it play in your life relative to all the other pieces for you?
And so I'm a manager. I manage a team. For me, it is heartbreaking to see that young people do not seem to want to be managers
Yeah.
because you can have such a positive impact on people's lives. So
Mm-hmm.
work is my everything. My team is my everything, really. And my aspirations maybe are not ambitious enough, but it is like if I can coach someone and improve their day at work, if I can produce a draft that will enable a faculty member to teach in the classroom, then that is what I'm for. And I think this notion of serving others at work, we're back to our theme of self versus others. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I heard you say, what do I need from work? Maybe it's time that we ask, what does work need from me? Which is when I'm presenting at work,
Yeah.
how can I create this work environment that I want? Not
Mm-hmm.
think about what is it in it for me. We all want these perfect societies. We all want
Yeah.
these perfect workplaces.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I don't want to swear on the air, but we're being suboptimal human beings
Yeah.
that resemble creatures that hop around.
Yeah.
And, that's not good either.
Yeah.
And then when we are on missions, then we are on, grandiloquent missions like I want to save the world, I want to fix the climate.
Yeah.
So I'm not a very inspirational guest because my real recommendation is that we just go back to really basics. And the French call it ras des pâquerettes, which is at the level of the weeds. I mean,
Mm.
back in the weeds, I guess the Americans say it also,
Yeah.
which is finding a way for work to be a place where I will be able to find joy, but that I will also understand that it is my job to help my manager and others find joy also. And
Mm.
a good reflection maybe at the end of the day is to say, whom did I annoy today? Was it worth it or not?
Yeah.
Who annoyed me and whose life could have done made better?
Yeah.
And actually, we developed with a collaborator a stress questionnaire where we do this for 21 days. Every day you write down saying, today this person really annoyed me
Mm-hmm.
and why, and
Yeah.
can you have a different kind of conversation? I think being more attuned with these little reflexes
Mm.
accumulate to really make work sucky. which
Yeah.
is the mission that you're on.
Yeah.
And all of your guests have given tools and ideas on how to do it, often for ourselves. But I think we have to think about how to do it for others.
I think that's a great point. I think um, finding this give and take between what do I bring and then what do I ultimately get back, but maybe just starting from the what do I bring perspective is an interesting flip. And I think, I think about young people coming out, and you talked about the expectations are a little skewed. And I wonder if they're not clear what they could bring. Meaning, so the concept of like, what do I bring to this place? It's like, I don't know what I bring. I don't know what I have to offer. And so they're seeking something from this place to kind of fill that. And then they're hoping, I think, I'll figure out maybe what I bring. And I feel like in schools, colleges, that conversation maybe isn't happening, at least based on observation of the way kids are coming out now. I hear from executives at companies, people I work with, something similar. And it's not like, oh, these kids today, like, it's just a little more like they're not quite ready for this, And I sit there and I go, well, that feels like a failure of the schools. And maybe it's also families and other stuff and some of the cultural stuff going on in terms of not giving kids the chance to learn and grow and develop because there's this hovering helicopter parent thing going on. So I can see that being a factor. But when you get into a university setting, I think at one point there was a little bit of a sink or swim mindset in a university setting, and it was a chance for you to figure out who you are and what do I bring to the table. And are universities no longer doing that, or at least not doing it as effectively? And what would it look like in 2025, 2026 to create a university environment that challenges us a little bit more to step into who we are, as opposed to trying to simply say, I'm going to give you everything you need.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to step up and show us who you are. And in some ways, that's how we make this a better school. But that seems like a big shift from maybe where we are now. What do you think is needed to bring that to life a little bit?
So I like that you always say, what would this look like?
Yeah.
I think a realization that things don't feel good might be a realization that, things need to be different.
Yeah.
One thing that I really liked about what you said is, the kind of flippantly say kid these days. That is really something that I dislike greatly. And actually, we wrote in Fast Company an article on snowflakes versus icebergs. And the research actually suggests that, they have the same drivers as we do, which is, you want to be seen, safe, secure, have enough money to do what you want. And this whole narrative around, well, they're entitled and there's this and this, it doesn't help anybody. And, people shouldn't have respect. That being said, graduates are coming out of institutions with accommodations. And we still have a workplace that finds it very difficult to provide accommodations because it's still a Taylorist system. And I think that's been one of these grinding of the wheels that we have felt. I don't think it's just intention, but I think it's because I needed to do the work. This is the time that I have allotted to it. My sense now of the new generation, is that I've had a lot of young people say, when I have kids, they won't be on screens.
Yeah.
I have deleted a bunch of apps. I have now joined a knitting circle. And these may all be little drops, but I think that we are starting to get back to community and effort. And that also the schools, you see in Harvard, my institution, we just had an award of students who are very intent on bringing back conversations around difficult topics on campus. Because even they realize that is a muscle that we have lost.
Yeah.
And the inability to tackle problems. So to be, as they say, to be difficult on the problem, it's so much easier to be difficult on each other.
Yeah.
So I think we are starting some of these things, I think, in schools. So I'm going to hope to be positive on this.
Yeah.
We've gone now half an hour without talking. You did mention AI early on.
Yeah.
I think that AI is the ultimate addiction.
Yeah.
And I think that everything that we have said so far would be okay. But now the ability to get anything so easily is going to make this impatience that we feel even worse.
Yeah.
And that's going to be really a very, very strong siren song for all of us to resist. And I think especially for young people.
Yeah. I mean, I think where we're seeing it already is in writing skills. And I've written my whole life. I love writing. It's been part of my work my whole life as well. And to me, writing isn't just like, oh, I'm creating words for people to read. Writing is thinking. And it is how you problem solve. It's how you discover who you are, what you bring to the world. Like all of this stuff, writing is a wonderful tool to do that. And when AI substitutes for something like that, it's like, it can feel like a really nifty fast forward button. Like I'm going to learn all those things by asking ChatGPT. What you realize is you fast forwarded through all of the learning part, and all you're getting is this output, which is like, I get it. If I'm a kid in school and it's a way to get a paper done, like I get the incentive to do it. But then, and I get the same, or if you're a 50-year-old working in an office and you need to deliver some kind of presentation and it can do it, I get it. Mm-hmm. But at some point, that becomes a loss in terms of what are we even doing anymore? How do we even decide what we're doing? And if I've lost my processing capability, my thinking capability, my discernment, all of that starts to atrophy. All I know how to do is input things into AI and get a result. At some point, first of all, I don't even know if that result is actually good. But also, like, why am I asking for that in the first place? And like that feels like where AI gets a little funky, and just modern life in general. It's like we're zooming past the whole point of it all to just get the output. Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you're liking what you hear and like the idea of making work not suck, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session. What's the one thing bugging you the most at work right now? Let's talk about it. All right, back to the show.
Yes. And I think acceleration is really a problem. So I'm a person with disability.
Yeah.
When the light changes, I'm slow on foot. I get honked at even when the walk sign is still on.
Wow.
Because, I'm fit presenting and they're like, why is this woman like blocking my way? And, occasionally I look at people and I go up to their window. I said, what are you doing? Right. You're honking at a person who's slow on foot in between two hospitals. Probably not a good place to honk at somebody in general. So I think this impatience is difficult and it makes it harder to concentrate. So we're having a conversation. For most people, being fully, attentive to each other as we are to each other, to me is an ultimate luxury and really what life is all about, but it is becoming difficult. So to be a complete devil's advocate on two items that you said, you've mentioned Gen AI as a replicator, as a replacer. I think it has immense possibilities, just as Google did, just as, smartphones had, to open up knowledge to billions and billions of people who didn't have it. So you can use ChatGPT, Gen AI, whatever you're using, to basically have a tutor at home, which used to be, only the privileged folks could have it. If you are somewhere in Tajikistan and you have a smartphone, you can visit all of the museums in the world. So I wouldn't like our concern around the replacement tools of AI to obfuscate the fact that it could be an immense driver of equality in the world.
Yeah.
The second is, because you and I are eloquent, we might look down on individuals whose English or speech weren't as good. I mean, even, George Bush, our president, was making fun of because he's not eloquent, our current president.
Yeah.
So we've been over-indexing on eloquence. And one thing that I really like about ChatGPT is that it's enabling people whose ideas we might not have listened to because they didn't sound good or they didn't sound the way we speak.
Yeah.
And now they can write emails that will not be discarded as unworthy.
Yeah.
Same thing with people who are writing second or third language.
Sure. Yeah.
So there is a real positive side, I think, to Gen AI
Yeah.
connect to connect people. So I wouldn't want to lose
Yeah.
track of that, in a way. I think we are a little bit negative. I think the other side of the coin is maybe we don't need language anymore. Maybe we don't need to learn to read and write. I know this is not the topic here, but
Yeah.
I'm a writer for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And so when this really came on board in November 2022, we had a team meeting and I told our team what we have to do is double down on what we're uniquely good at. And that's interviewing people, storytelling, crafting a narrative, understanding pedagogical goals. We've been very active in trying to experiment with ChatGPT. We're now 3 years nearly to the date later of that team meeting. We're still writing. And so there are things that humans will be still uniquely good at doing that I think will not be replaced. Back to the workplace, it doesn't feel good when people ask me, oh, you still have a job. That's surprising.
Mm.
And I'm certainly
Yeah.
not alone. A lot of people have been put out of business or told that the skills that they have honed for so many years are no longer worth having. So I think that's difficult at the workplace at the moment.
Yeah.
Also,
I think it's adding to the sense of chaos and
yeah.
turmoil that people are feeling. And you mentioned something earlier that I want to come back to as it relates to this specifically, right? You mentioned how could, somebody basically says, how could you possibly have had a good day today? The world's on fire. And what I think is sort of flipping that in a way, like it's almost my job to find a way to show up in a positive, useful way in the midst of all this, because what good does it do for me to have my hair on fire all day? So I think about, finding ways to maybe bring a little calm into the chaos and finding opportunities to give people chances to have conversations like this where we do slow down for a bit. There's stuff that's going to be going faster and faster and faster, but if we can show up in that in our best way, coming back to this idea of serving, we're then giving people a chance to actually be okay in the midst of that, because the only way we're going to get through this and ultimately not maybe feel like the world's always on fire is if we are okay. And I think there's this odd sense of like duty that we have to feel bad and therefore reduce our own sense of agency and ownership and ultimately ability to feel okay within that. And I just think we need to flip that idea and go like, what can I bring into this day that allows the people around me to be more okay with whatever they're dealing with?
I think
That's a
so.
gift.
Yes, I think so. I think, how can I make people's day better today at work
Yeah.
would already go a very long way because little gestures make a huge difference. And if we believe that stress is contagious, I know that research has been slightly debunked, but we could
Yeah.
believe the corollary, which is, non-stress. So negative stress, of course, stress is wonderful because it propels us forward and we learn and we perform under stress. So we've also demonized stress in a way that I find unhelpful, but negativity. I mean, there is an addiction or outrage feels good though, TJ. So the question is, I don't skew outrageous, so maybe it's just my disposition. Maybe I was born this way.
Yeah.
And I count my blessings, really, really every day. But it feels good to be outraged because it enables you to feel superior. And I think this superiority complex is really problematic. And I think it's problematic at work. Because it's like, well, who are these men? They don't understand anything. Who are these people? They don't know. Oh. So we used to do it with, marketing doesn't understand production.
Yeah.
Those used to be functions.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're people's identities.
Yeah.
Or their lived experiences that, we make ourselves feel better at their expense, either directly or at their reputational expense.
Mm.
And I think that's really unfortunate.
I would agree. Yeah, go ahead.
No, but how do you get to then, you said, how would you do that? And I
Yeah.
love that you always say that is how do you then have conversation where people are willing to take collective responsibility when we're in a hyper individualized world?
Yeah.
Everything is personalized.
Yeah. I know you're working towards helping managers. And I think in many ways, managers are at they're the pivot point in all of this, right? Because
Yes.
they see in both directions. So they have access enough to kind of know what leadership is doing and what directionally is happening in the mood of all that. But you're also seeing the groundwork. So you have a really unique perspective, and therefore your impact as a lever within this is really strong, right? So I think to your point, showing up with the idea of like, how can I make the experience of all this better? Well, one is I can learn to manage my emotions a little better personally and
Mm-hmm.
model a certain behavior, instead of going the easy dopamine hit of my team, we're the best, and those people are trying to make our lives miserable, which I get it. I mean, I worked in advertising for 25 years, and that was a daily occurrence. I mean, I
Yes.
worked in the creative team, and then there was the strategy team, production team, client services team. And there is a historic sort of battle between the creatives and the client service team, because the client service team is telling you that the client doesn't like something or whatever, or they're not going to like something. And so they're trying and as a creative, you're going, okay, you're trying to kill my work, make it suck, crush it. And as a client service person, you're going like, these creatives are big babies who don't take any feedback and don't want to hear no ever. And like, all of that is sort of true, meaning like, but when you make it this us versus them thing, and then you spend the rest of your life building those skills because my political team is better, my identity category is better, my whatever, my gender is better, whatever. We're building those skills so intensely and so rapidly, because I can spend an hour online and probably have 38 intense interactions around something that I feel superior about. And of course, you're going to then bring that even more so into work. And so now we're the good guys. Okay, well, then they're the bad guys. If you're the manager of one of those teams, just simply resisting that urge.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to preach to your team and say, I mean, at some point you might be able to have these conversations perhaps with your team. But at first, I think just turn your own temperature down, right? And show up like, I'm okay in all of this. I'm okay. And yeah, I'm not always happy with the things that the other team says or does. I might even fight for what we believe in, but they're not bad people.
No.
And I'm going to resist the urge to do that. And some people might start to notice that. And then slowly you might shift the culture a little bit, and you set some boundaries around that. And you start to, once you've established it, you can start to go, this is part of what we're looking for when we hire people, is some amount of emotional regulation around this, because we can shift into that space quickly. So I want people who are at least aware of that. So there's some intention around it, and I think there's some modeling around it. But I'm curious what you're noticing that people are able to do that helps as well.
Yeah. So our book actually started the framework of concentric circles. And the first one really is exactly what you mentioned, which is this self-awareness. And I think, you can provide all the mental health resources to employees if you have a manager who is not, in a place of being able to sort of self-regulate or have these tools. So self-awareness is the first one. But in addition to self-awareness is also education, which is, I think, then managers who do come into the workplace and have been encouraged to be empathetic or caring. Frankly, I don't like empathy at all, because I don't think that you can ever know what it feels like to be in someone else's shoes. So the word we used was compassion. Okay. Compassion is my ability to feel that maybe I could help you in some ways, and I could think about what resources to provide to you. So this distinction between my job is to make you feel better, to my job is to think about what are the tools in my arsenal and structures and resources that I have that may give you the chance for you to feel better on your own.
Yeah.
The second important thing, in addition to self-awareness, is, and well, maybe this part of self-awareness, is that we are coming into a lot of these conversations with our own biases. So an example that I often use is my father drank. I mean, my father really was an alcoholic. Yeah. And he was a kind person, but after the war, talk about war trauma, he needed to drink, a bottle of vodka to get through every day. Yeah. He was a lovely person. So I might be a person, if I see somebody who has a substance use disorder, to say, oh, it's not so bad and it's going to be okay. Or, I'm a single mom and I had a good time. It wasn't that hard. So I may be under indexing for the pain that someone else is feeling. So in addition to self-awareness is also the ability to not project our own experience or care onto others. So to regulate our emotions, but also to keep our stereotypes in check.
That's
and
great.
I think that this push towards making, managers sort of the chief mental health officers of their teams has led to unfortunate and unfair outcome, because then I will be like, oh, well, clearly she's stressed, so she cannot get promoted, or she's a single mom, she cannot get promoted. So I think starting there at the manager level, but then also thinking about what are actually the tools that this population needs. So having difficult conversations would be one of them, in addition to self-regulation and being aware of stereotypes. And then there are a whole host of things that we wrote in the book that we don't tend to think about as managers, which is, where do you sit? We assign people to desks. I get distracted by little noises. I probably should not sit by an elevator. With whom am I going to pair you? Are you really a good match for this kind of personality? If I have a choice, maybe I shouldn't pair you. When we have our one-on-ones, can I ask you less idiotic questions? And so how are you doing? What stood in the way of you getting your work done last week? What is something that you wish you could change? What is something that I can do for you? Is there a resource you're missing? Getting down to these specific questions rather than these sort of like, so are you feeling supported at work and all of that?
Right.
And then the final thing is that companies that have tried to improve well-being at work, we're back to the beginning of our conversation, do not have any baseline metrics. So people have not defined what well-being means at work. You see the Gallup questions, they haven't changed in 20 years. They're so vague and open that I think what I recommend to folks, who really do want to try to make a difference, is to have a definition of, so what does well-being mean for us, TJ? We're in a company. Does it mean that you and I are going to compete to see which team is better? I should hope so. Does it mean that we're going to be mean about it? Absolutely not.
Right.
And so having a set of questions that we think are the right questions to ask instead of how are you feeling, I think would also go a long way. And so the way that we thought about it was the manager, then the team, which is the people that you can affect. But then the ripple effects are huge also, because, as a manager, if I ruin your day, you're going to yell at somebody in the bus, you'll come home, you'll yell at your kid, and your kid is going to yell at somebody the day after. That kid will be my kid, then I'll be unhappy the next day, and you know where I'm going. Your encouragement that we interrupt these chains of outrage and unhappiness, I think, was beautifully stated.
And I really, really like the idea, two things. One, the distinction between I'm going to just try to fix this for you as opposed to giving you tools so that you can fix it. I think that comes back to some of what we've been talking about, which is it's releasing some control. I can't control how you behave. I can set
nor how you feel.
I can certainly set the table a little bit for how we behave collectively. Otherwise, I can just point you in certain directions or give you some, words of encouragement that maybe have helped me. And then I offer it to you and say, hey, this might be useful to you. This might be useful. I think the bias thing is really interesting, and that intersects a little bit with empathy too, right? Because if I'm trying to be empathetic and I'm trying to be in someone else's shoes, I'm often just being in my shoes, in their shoes. And that's when the bias creeps in. If I was a single mother, this is how I would feel, as opposed to, okay, I can appreciate that this woman is feeling stressed, partly due to the fact that she is raising a child on her own. I can also ask questions of like, how can I be helpful to you? What would be useful to you when you are having some of these challenges? Or, if it's affecting your schedule, how can I support you on the schedule because you need more flexibility? I really love the specificity. Because, and I think in conjunction with organizations or teams, maybe even defining what wellness and mental health means within that team or organization, as opposed to it being just some broad generalization of, do we feel good? What do we want good to feel like here? And
Yes.
that's even a cultural question. Like, some companies might want to be a little more competitive, and we want to foster a competitive environment, and we might push it a little more.
Yes.
And no, we don't get to the place where you're abusive to each other, but we might have some playful,
Yes.
like competitive energy around it, where other places might not want that as much. And this is
Yes.
how we collaborate and connect.
Yeah.
And taking ownership of it is where it feels really interesting to me.
Yeah. Maybe a last thing that I would say is, make sure that you ask those questions of everyone, though, because I'm hearing you asking the single parent, maybe you need flexibility, maybe you're stressed because you're raising a child alone. There are plenty of people who are not raising children alone who are very stressed.
Of course.
And then maybe single parents who are very happy. And in the pandemic, one of my big upsets was that everybody was very worried about parents. Parents got extra time off, and it was so stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, the young people in my team had to work for the time that others weren't there. When they couldn't date, they had to work on their beds in, apartments with roommates. And nobody thought to ask, how does this feel for young people?
Yeah.
And so if you're asking a question of one person, if you're asking a single mother if she's stressed, I would like us to think about asking whatever fill in the blank white man who seems to have, a perfect family at home.
Yeah.
If there's anything that you could do
for sure.
to make things better. So that would be and that is really hard.
Yeah.
And that is really hard. But I think this push on well-being without an education has led to lack of fairness.
Yeah.
And then when I see, somebody's getting an accommodation and I am not, then you are negative to where you started.
Mm.
And the central job of managers is to match the job demands to the job resources. So literally, what is it that you have and what is it that I have? And that is the central job of management. And I think if we double down on that, we would desuckify work a little bit.
Yeah. And I think back to one of your earlier points of how do we set boundaries at work and set expectations around what you bring to work and what you don't bring to work. And you can make a manager's job a little easier if you do create some of those boundaries and not ask a manager to be sort of a daycare provider.
Yes.
As well as that. And that's tough because there is this push and pull between I want to show up and bring more of myself to work idea. And my take on that is bring more of, to your point, how I can show up and serve at work. Bring it, everything you've got.
Yes.
We want all of that. And we will appreciate, recognize, and reward that. But to the extent like bringing in your politics or some of the personal challenges, like that's where it does get tricky. Is it my job as a manager it's okay if you tell me you're affected by something, but I'm not your therapist. And that's where it gets a little confusing. Where does the line as a manager end in terms of what is okay to bring into work and not? Where do you feel like we should draw those lines?
So I guess that's what all of this work is about. I learn a lot, and I partner with organizational psychiatrists and therapists. And I think if they were answering this question, they would say that managers absolutely should not go into the realm of diagnosis or support or anything. I think they're really to stick to what is it possibly that I can be to you in this moment.
Yeah.
And what is in the arsenal that I have to support you. I think opening up a possibility for people to be honest about what is going on with them, however, is also important because it may be that somebody just needs to talk. So I did have a situation where somebody said something and I said, well, if you'd like to take a leave or, talk to your family, etc. And then 3 months later, I was like, so how are you doing? And they were like, the fact that I could talk to you was good enough. And I didn't even mention it to my family, and I am here. I don't want to come off as advocating non-conversation.
Yeah.
I'm advocating strongly that managers be willing to listen, but do not overstep towards fixing.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
That would be my line in the sign.
Yeah. I can see that being a good space. And then I think as organizations, part of the question has become like, well, if we're going to offer any resources in this area, what are those? And what I've heard from you a little bit is I'm not sure we've quite cracked the code on that yet in terms
No.
of what it is. And part of it is because we haven't even had the conversation of what are we trying to accomplish in terms of what does wellness actually look like?
Yes. And if you think of what you're trying to do is basically an equation,
Mm-hmm.
and there's been a lot of investment in more time off, gyms, remote work, mental
Yeah.
health apps, dog walking services, menopause services, whatever. But it really hasn't changed much. And so I think my thought research has been on the other side of the equation, which is, what really has changed in how human beings think of work. Because clearly we're constantly in off balance. And so either the expectations have risen even faster than what we have provided, which is kind of my instinct at the moment.
Yeah.
And that is on us a little bit to think about our own contributions as people. One tool that I think managers really underuse are exit interviews. And so I think exit interviews are a very good place to say, TJ, you remember when you had this situation in your family? Did you feel supported? Could we have done things differently? Do you have any feedback for me as a
Interesting.
manager as how I handled that? Now
Yeah.
you're leaving. Can you tell me honestly what really ticked you off here?
Yeah.
And then you must say, I hate the way your emails sound.
Yeah.
And so, I sometimes ask people when we do reviews, I always ask, what do I do that annoys you?
Yeah.
And people will say your nose is too close on Zoom, but then people don't listen to you because your nose is
Right.
too
All
close.
they're
You know
focused
what I
on
mean?
is that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's funny.
we're missing these micro moments
Mm-hmm.
of connections on stuff that together really hurt the wheels of connection
Yeah. That's a
at
great
work.
point. I think, I think we undervalue that true connection at work. And the exit interview is interesting. What I hear from you also though is those exit interviews are going to be more useful if you've started having these kinds of conversations on an ongoing basis. And then maybe they just can feel a little more free at the exit interview. Because what I've noticed with some exit interviews is people are still afraid, partly because you've conditioned them to be afraid.
Yes.
It's just not a place where you can speak freely. The other thing I notice sometimes is people fear if I really put it all out there, they don't trust, and maybe that's because you haven't built trust, that will be used in a useful way as opposed to somehow coming back to bite them.
Yes, absolutely. But and now we're like at the beginning of the life cycle. So one way also to think about stress at work is that we tend to be very focused on once the person is there, like
Yeah.
what can I do? But I think in that dating conversation around, oh, this is the greatest workplace ever. So when I interview, I tell people, listen, this is what I'm like at work. I have very strong good sides and I have very, very strong negatives.
Mm-hmm.
And those are they.
Yeah.
And if that is difficult for you,
Yeah.
then I'm going to coach you, I'll support you, but I don't do well with these character traits, and it's just the way it goes. And then you have a higher chance of having the person on the other side say, well, actually, these are things that I dislike. And one question that I like to ask of candidates is, what are your pet peeves? And in that answer, often the answer is not interesting. The answer is why that answer. And then you get to conflict, you get to expectations. I don't like people who are slow at Starbucks. I don't like female bosses. I don't like people
Yeah.
who steal my food, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So even there, I think finding ways to understand you're human, the people at work as humans is okay. Pretending that we know how to be their therapists I would say, is not okay.
Yeah. I would agree with that. And I really love that openness that you're talking about within an interview where you're like, these are my strong things. They're really great. Here's the stuff that's not great. And this is where I'm at. Yeah. Am I always working to improve? But I can tell you some of these have been around for a while and they're there. And
Yes.
they're certainly there today. So if you showed
Yes.
up tomorrow, they will be there because there's something very disarming about that. You're used to the sales pitch a bit
Yes.
in that interview
Yes.
session of like, we're shiny and happy and we have bagels on Mondays and we have Friday drinks and we have pizza parties and like we just love each other. And like, yeah, on some level, there's probably genuine love for the people you might work with. Like, I really love and care about these people. Sure, that's possible. But if my boss does something that really annoys me and that's core to who they are, I'm probably never getting past that. I don't care how many pizzas I get. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And back to romanticizing work, your manager is not, I mean, a perfect partner.
Right.
Will this manager develop me? Will they have my back when it's appropriate to have my back? Will they not have my back when it's appropriate for them not to have my back?
Yeah.
These are also things that people, I think, in recruiting need to find ways to ask of managers also. And I think we're missing these opportunities. Been a couple of people, who presented like with perfect resumes, had perfect writing samples. And in the interviews, TJ, I just couldn't get them to open up to me at all. What are your pet peeves? People who don't do excellent work. Okay, why? Well, because I do excellent work. Okay, why? And finally I said, if you do not give me anything that enables me to test whether I am a good human for your humanity, then I'm not going to hire you because I will not know how to help you.
Yeah.
And so that is really what I am after in these life cycle conversations. At promotion time, promotions are huge inflection points for mental health issues.
Yeah.
Divorce, death, these are the times when managers should be keeping an eye. Are you starting to miss deadlines? Are you being unkempt? Is your appearance changing? Are you curt on email?
Yeah.
And there is a good time to check in. Not in a nosy way, but so we know these things, there are inflection points, there are times in the employee life cycle. And those are the ones that we really try to go through in the book and that I've tried to write about, that give you an opportunity to build a bridge to the person whose lives you can really impact at work. And that is the greatest honor I know of my life.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying there. And I really love just the general notion of recognizing our own humanity and inviting others to share their humanity. Workplaces can feel so not human at times. We're like effectively putting armor over our humanity most times, or we're putting people on pedestals. Oh, my boss needs to be this sort of perfect person. It's like, no, they're just your neighbor. They're just that guy, that
they're just your husband.
Yeah, like they're just that person. So I think that's really beautiful. I know I've been asking you a bunch of questions here, Carin. I'd love to just see, do you have any questions you'd like to pose to our audience to get them thinking about this stuff more?
So I would love to hear from the audience about these little moments that they have seen at work or do at work, little tricks so that we can exchange them with each other. And I would be very grateful to that. That's something that I do when I speak in person.
Yeah.
And we go around the room rapidly and people share these things. So that I think would be wonderful. And maybe in thinking of these things, they can think of equivalent things to do either at work or at home or in community or online. I would like people to think about the fact that times have been difficult before, and then we're a very resilient and wonderful species, and that we're there for each other.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And I think when I think of those moments, I think of just like the things that you're almost not aware that you do anymore that maybe help you get through and could be almost life-changing for someone else. It's like, wow, like just a different mindset on something or something like that. Yeah.
One of the answers to that question one day came from a woman who had was a consultant to a hospital network. And there was a floor in this particular hospital that had very little turnover, excellent patient outcomes. And, they had all their fancy metrics. They couldn't figure it out. And finally, they asked one of the nurses, they said, why are you all so nice to each other? What are you all doing? And the one thing that I had was code purple. And purple was, if you needed help, all the nurses had either a little stethoscope, or a pin, or a little piece of jewelry. And if I crossed you in the corridor and I was having a really terrible moment, I just needed a minute, I needed you to take over for me, I would touch my lapel or say, I'm buying purple icing for my cake tonight. And that would be the cue that I was in distress and I would need something. the punchline to that story was that they really never used it.
Just knowing
Because
it was,
just knowing,
yeah,
just knowing. Just
that's
knowing
really
that
beautiful.
other people are out there and other people are out there for us. And you're out there for all of us, TJ. You're trying to make this better for all of us. So thank you for your time and your work and for all the guests who have come before me. It's been an immense honor to be in your company and theirs.
No, I appreciate that. I do have a couple other questions I'd love to put out there if you have time. Do you have time?
Sure. Yes.
One is just if you could wave a magic wand and make the world of work suck less, fully desuckified, what would that look like?
So I would want to focus on the vast majority of people whose financial situation is difficult. So my magic wand would be that we really endeavor to make wages, livable wages, so that people can have families. Because if there is financial stress, everything else is nearly impossible. And children of financially stressed parents will have more learning disabilities than others, will have a harder go of it.
Yeah.
So I think from a policy standpoint, a human standpoint, I would wish us to have more opportunities to do that.
No, I love that. One thing I do with a lot of my guests, and I'm going to invite you to do it. You can tell me if you're up for it. If you listen to my show, you'll hear some sound effects at the beginning of the show. There's cats meowing and stuff. And I always invite the guest to make a sound that can get put into the beginning of our episode. So is there any sound that you feel like you'd want to make that can show up in the show?
So I don't know whether that would be appropriate, but my sound would be the sound of a kiss, which is I'm sending everybody a lot of love. So it will be.
I like that. I think that's very nice. I think that really sends a delightful message. And I think it comes through in the way you speak, that you have a genuine love for people.
I do.
Want us to find ways to thrive in this world. The last question I always ask is just how can people find you online and learn more about your writing, your work, anything else you want to put out there?
So as you mentioned, I write on Medium, and then some pieces sometimes get picked up by the press. I'm also on LinkedIn. So that would be one way to do it. And the most precious thing for me is to hear from people about their stories. And if I can be of any assistance to anyone, I also do like to write with people from very different disciplines. You might have noticed I write with athletes, organizational psychiatrists, conductors, soldiers.
Yeah, I love that.
So if anybody has something to tell in the world and I'm a good writer, and so often that's a way to get their stories out and their knowledge out. So please reach out if you'd like to write something together. It would be fun.
I love that. And you're an excellent writer. I read a lot of your stuff, and I've got a fair amount of writers in my audience. So I think you might have perked people's ears up a little bit with that idea. And so I'll let people know that that's part of what you're putting out into the world. Yeah.
And especially the non-writers, and back to why ChatGPT is good. And I know we all love to hate the output of ChatGPT, but it does enable people's voices and ideas to,
so if you've got a story,
to be heard.
You're not sure how to put it out there.
Exactly. Reach out to me. Yes. Yeah. I've written with ballerinas. I've written with and this is also how I learn a great deal, because many, many other disciplines can teach us a lot about work.
Yeah, I love that.
As we understand it,
Awesome. Well, Carin.
Phenomenal. TJ, thank you for the gift of this conversation. It really was fun.
Likewise, I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to putting it out into the world and having people hear more about what you're doing.
Me too. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone, for tuning into the DesuckifyWork podcast. And a huge thanks to Carin for bringing intelligence, empathy, and sharp insights to the show. You can follow Carin on LinkedIn and check out her Medium newsletter at CarinIsabelKnoop.medium.com. If you enjoyed the conversation and would like to find some calm in the chaos of work, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session. Type meow in the calendar invite, and I'll also send you a free DesuckifyWork t-shirt. Bye, everyone.